Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we are here today to discuss Leviathan Wakes, the first book in the Expanse series, with some friends today, and a newcomer to our streams. So I'll let everyone introduce themselves. And John, do you want to start us off with an introduction? Tell us about your channel.
All right. Yeah, my name is John. My channel name is Hey Y'all Listen Up. I cover mostly Piers Anthony. That's my favorite author, but kind of classic science fiction and fantasy. Try to read some newer stuff as well. That's part of why I read Leviathan Wakes, and so that's kind of what my channel is about.
And Layla, you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. My name is Layla Goshi. I am a writer and also an English professor in St. Louis.
And Robin?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name's Robin. My channel is Bookends and Biscuits. I mostly read sci-fi because space is awesome, but also fantasy and crime as well, generally. But yeah, space and sci-fi is the best.
Yeah, I haven't read too much sci-fi, but I found myself enjoying this one a lot more than I expected to. So I'm coming over to the side. So, John, what did you think about this one? I kind of have an idea, but what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, it's a very kind of middle of the road book for me. I wound up giving it 3 stars. I thought about giving it 4, but it's not. It's not a four-star book for me by any. And I was kind of curious as why, because I enjoy science fiction, and this is a book I really should have enjoyed. And I was kind of scratching my head, but as I started to review my notes for this, I was like, "Yep, I remember now why." I kind of gave it 3 stars, and it's just I didn't find the storyline as interesting as I would have liked, or the characters as interesting. So it was just, it's not bad, and there are definitely things about the book that I did appreciate. But then again, and I think part of the problem is as soon as the chapter with the detective came on up, I was like, okay, this is a detective story, and for some reason, detective stories aren't my thing. I think it just lost the star right there. So,
And did you watch the adaptation, or did you just have
I have not. I have not seen it. No.
Okay. Layla, what did you think about? Well, first, did you see the adaptation, and what did you think about this one?
I did see the adaptation, and I really enjoyed it. I made sure I binged it, and then I made sure to catch up, on episodes that came out later. And so I enjoyed the story, but I found the show to be much more political than I found the first book. So now the first book, is standing on its own as a certain, as a story. But overall, I liked it as I was saying, as a fun read and a quick read, because it's kind of got that, you know, it's got the same vibe as like all the Star Trek stories. I used to buy all of those like little, $4 or $5 books with all the Star Trek stories in them, the little Star Trek episodes. And so it was, as I, heard other people say, like the space opera or the soap opera in space, so to speak. There's a love interest, there's danger, and then it's just fun. Yeah, so I enjoyed it.
And Robin, did you see the adaptation? And because you read this previously, have you seen the live adaptation or the adaptation for it?
Yes, yeah, I did. I read the book, as I said, first quite a long time ago, then watched the series, and then I've reread it. I really enjoyed the series. I thought it was quite true to the book, at least the first book, and I thought they did it really well. The book itself, I adore it, but I think that's because I actually really enjoy crime as well. So sci-fi and crime together as a crossover is like my absolute favorite. So as soon as I saw that the kind of crime, almost noir crime feel brought in, to me that put it up rather than down. So obviously that's just personal choice, personal preference. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a very fun one. It's got all the space opera politics. It's got all the everything like that. It's a quick read. It's got full of action. I really adored it myself. So I thought it was great.
I just want to say hi to Chris. Thanks for coming by, Chris. And of course, Lauren. He's one of my go-tos for book suggestions. But I did enjoy this one. Because I've seen the live adaptation, and I was a little nervous because it's sometimes I need some space between the book and the adaptation. But I thought the book was great. I loved it. When I was finished it, there's just something missing that doesn't make it like great. There's just something that's really good. I don't know what it is. There's just something missing from it being great. But I had a different view on the characters, like Miller especially. I liked Miller a lot more in the book because I felt like he was fleshed out a little bit more in his history and what he was thinking that you didn't necessarily get in the show. In the show, he seemed kind of like an odd duck, but in the book, you realize why he's so attached to finding Julie. So.
Yeah, I think he's just got such a sad storyline as well. Like I think you're right. In the TV, it was a bit more, like you said, just a kind of an odd character. But in this one, some of the points for Miller were just kind of like, oh my god, poor guy. So you really feel for him like halfway through. So yeah, I really liked Miller as a character.
I feel like Amos came across very differently in the book to me in a good way than the show. I did enjoy him in the show. I always enjoyed, seeing his perspective, but he just seemed smarter, I guess, in the book, or just more aware of what was going on. I don't know why in the show, but it always seemed like he was, not quite understanding what was going on or kind of missing things. I mean, that's the impression I got. But in the book, he's a lot more intuitive, and I liked that. But if I had not seen the show, I think, Miller would have been my standout character as well.
John, which character stuck out for you?
I would say, Miller and Holden. I mean, they're the two main characters, so they're the ones that kind of stood out the most to me. As far as secondary characters, I kind of like the lieutenant on the Martian warship, the one that kind of helps them get to the Corvair. I think his name was Kelly, wasn't it, Lieutenant Kelly?
Mm-hmm.
I think so, yeah.
I don't remember.
Pushing my name memory.
You know what, though, in regard to the end, which I think, John, you had mentioned the ending, something that I realized after reading this that I never caught in the show was that, it ended up being kind of an Adam and Eve story, because you had Eros, which is isn't Eros the guy that was kind of like Cupid with the arrow of love or something like that? And then maybe I'm wrong, but then they end up on Venus. I mean, they crash into Venus, and Miller's in love with Julie. I mean, there's just kind of this thing where it seems like, I mean, that is kind of a formula to kind of use mythic representation of something happening. And I did enjoy that in a kind of tongue-in-cheek way. I mean, I found that kind of amusing. Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
No, I hadn't. Yeah, I hadn't picked up on that at all, actually. But thinking about it, it's quite good.
Yeah. And I can't remember if it was portrayed on the show like that at all. But then even Leviathan is from the Old Testament. It was like a sea monster in the Old Testament. So it just felt like they were trying to pull on these mythic symbols. But it's at the same time, it didn't come across as that deep to me. So I'm not sure if they hit the mark, or it's just kind of a fun thing to just kind of notice,
Like a wink and a nod.
A wink and a nod.
Chris says, it's interesting to see how people view Leviathan Wakes in isolation. It's a series that builds the world and intrigue slowly over time. Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah. Something that I really enjoyed about this book is that it focused on this group of characters and didn't get so much into the political part of it. Like the show has those storylines at the same time, and I was a little worried about too many points of view. So I'm glad that this had a focus on that storyline.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the later books it gets much more, as you said, much wider, much more political, and pulling in between like Mars and Belta and everything else. This one was a much more enclosed story, wasn't it? Because you get a touch of it from Holden just smashing through everything and opening up to all the different places, accidentally or not. But yeah, you don't really see much of the ramifications, I think, until the later books. So yeah.
And maybe that's one reason I didn't enjoy this first book as much, is because it did not go into that. Maybe if it had, I might have been a bit more interested.
No, yeah, you're right, because it does focus a lot on the is it Julie Mao story quite a lot, and that kind of thing. So that's half the book, isn't it? So yeah, maybe later on the other books, when it's a little bit more about politics, it might be better for other people.
How much of the series have you read, Robin? Have you read the whole thing?
No. I think I actually can't remember, which is one of the reasons I want to reread them. I think I'm not sure, but I think I was maybe book 5 or book 6. But as I said, I literally just stopped reading or waited for the next book and then forgot to pick it up. So then it was years, and I have to reread to remember the whole plot. So yeah, it'd be good. I can't even remember much of book 2, so I think it's gonna be fun trying to pick that up as well.
And something that the one thing that did bother me was the whole why don't they fly into the sun? You know, it's I kind of took it as a joke, like women are from Venus, so crash into Venus is the. You know, I think someone asked him, "Why did you tell them to go to Venus?" And he said it was a joke. But that was one thing that kind of like, why wouldn't you just fly into the sun? This is over. But yeah, that was a little. But I guess that's a way for them to keep it going. But.
I think there was one line where it might have been Holden that at one point also responds, "Well, do you want to see a giant spire coming out of the sun?" Like they're you know, and I don't know. It was kind of a throwaway line, but I don't know if that was in there just to kind of answer that question. But I felt the same thing. I mean, that would be hopefully problem solved.
Yeah.
And if not, if there were a concern that it could like eat the sun or something, who knows, then maybe the book needed a little more discussion of that so that it was more obvious to us.
I think I always assumed, and I don't know if this was written anywhere in the book, but I always assumed it was because it would be unlikely they were able to get her to pilot into the sun, because there had to be some sort of like a agreement from her on where she wanted to take it. So I think I always just assumed that it was because she wouldn't, or the protein monitor wouldn't allow them to destroy it completely. But I think that was an assumption rather than something that was clearly written in the book as well.
No, that makes sense because he did have to convince her to change course. So no, that makes sense. I didn't think about it that way. I wondered what all of you thought when with Holden and his thought behind release, providing information for everyone and not keeping things silent. And I guess if you're in that situation and the ship with everyone for the past however many years blows up, your reaction may be to go announce it to everyone and warn everyone. But is that the best thing to do? And because it started this whole mess. So I wondered what all of you thought about that. If you were in that position, would you want everyone to know what's happening, or would you keep it quiet?
It's one of those things where he could have handled it better with his word choice. But we all know that if you try to go through channels and try to keep it secret, it never works. So just what he did, probably it's the best of some bad decisions, a choice of bad decisions, which I'm sure will come up later in the discussion too.
Yeah.
I think as far as the character, it showed that he's kind of like the guy that can never tell a lie. He's just got to tell everything he knows. But on a different aspect of it, I thought, why is he the first one to have ever done this? Because if anybody can just, it's kind of like the internet, if anybody can just open the mic and say whatever they want to say to the whole galaxy or solar system. I'm surprised he's the first one, but maybe that also shows just the level of civilization or the culture that they've come to where they don't do that. So, yeah.
I think in the first instance, I think probably to me it made sense because he was also trying to save himself by broadcasting, and that kind of seemed like the only way. I think as you got later on when he was just broadcasting like everything, it also almost showed like I think Miller brought it up, his like naivety around what exactly he was putting out there without vetting it first. And I really loved that conversation with Miller and Holden later in the book where Miller's just like, what are you doing? Are you not looking at the ramifications of all of this and not looking at it from a point of view where not everyone's a good person and they're going to use that to their advantage? So I thought that was good. And I really liked the interaction between Miller and Holden because Miller's more of a grey character. Like he's not bad, but he doesn't, his motivations or whatever, I don't know, like chaotic neutral almost. I think it's kind of like, but Holden's very much more of a thinks everyone's going to do the right thing. So he doesn't seem to look at the ramifications of that. And I think that was quite interesting on it. But yeah, it was good.
Those two characters did play good on each other. I'm sorry, Layla. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say it brings him a lot of power. It upsets the power balance just by him. It's not even the information. It's just that, it is the information too, but it's his, he's become a spokesperson. And so he's drawing both good and bad to him. And again, with him being the righteous one, to me, that kind of took on this, prophet sort of way of looking at it. I mean, again, with a wink and a nod, not that I'm taking it as being that deep, but I kind of got that kind of vibe from it.
Chris says it goes to whom Holden is as a character. He has a simplistic view of right and wrong, and that is somewhat naive. He's a character that I am still conflicted about.
Yeah.
So with your viewpoints of this discussions about the names of things and about the nod and the wink, what did you think about the idea of flying the massive generation ship and using that to ram Eros? Do you think that had anything behind it at all, or was it just a good plot point?
Like how? Explain further the generation ship.
The Mormon ship?
What that represents,
Yeah, there's all kind. I haven't really thought through that, but it does. Now that you say that, it just seems like we're coming back again to these belief systems and myths, and he's making these things collide, and he's bringing things together. And I think that might be something with the books to watch further. I haven't read any of the other books, but and actually say he because there's two different authors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. I didn't realize that for such a long time. I felt really stupid when I found out that there was a pen name for the two authors together. I was just like, oh.
Same here. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, well, I actually thought it was a clever idea to, that scheme to have the generation ship kind of slam into it to destroy it. But really, the whole point of it is to show the asteroid move out of the way, just to because that was quite an accomplishment to move itself out of the way in the space in the time that it had to do it. So that was really just a insert to show you to show you that it was the reveal that it had become self-aware and was able to act on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like a device, I guess, to show they could.
I felt really bad for the Mormons, though. You know,
Yeah.
all this set up, and they were ready to go, and then at the last minute, you know, they were so dedicated and had all this plan, and they were going to be there for generations, and it's this. I'm sure they, a lot went into it, and then they just take their ship. I felt bad for the Mormons. I don't know. I feel bad for them.
No, I did as well. I had that whole thing where they had to like go in and take them all off the ship because they were refusing to move, and I was like, yeah, that much money and that much time and effort, just like all down the drain. Not
Yeah.
good.
All for nothing.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the character? Was it Fred? What's his Fred? The guy who was part of the boater.
Johnson, isn't it?
Yeah, Fred Johnson. Yeah. What did you guys think to his character? Because he's quite a main secondary character, I think.
I mean, I like, again, in the show, I wasn't quite sure where he's coming from, but the book, I get a much better sense of what is going on. But at the same time, I don't see him as being completely, I guess, trying to make amends. I mean, from the way the story goes, from the way the book is, he has seen how much damage he caused, and so now he's kind of switched sides and through his work trying to make amends. But at the same time, he's still someone who's looking out for his own interests. Yeah, because he wanted the protomolecule. He was trying to get that information from Holden. Yeah. So I do like his character. I think there's a really great. He has a great future in the books. So.
What did you think about Fred, John?
He's an okay character. I mean, I didn't dislike him. I guess he was kind of too much of a stereotype for me to really get invested in his character. So, I mean, not a bad character, but not a great one either.
I did. I think I'm with Layla in that. I'm not sure about his motivations. I think he's trying to maneuver himself and trying to get the right position. But he could have taken the protomolecule from Holden and the crew by force if he wanted to. But I think he was playing the long game and trying to win their favor and trying to play all the angles and just hoping things would work out eventually in his favor. He ended up with the molecule anyway. But I don't. And I just want to mention, I don't know who casted the actors for the show, but they did a fantastic job because the descriptions of the characters in the book are very, very close to the actors that are on the show.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only difference they seem to they seem to describe the Belters as very tall and thin, and I guess that's something they couldn't really replicate to the extent they were described in the book. But still, yeah, I thought the casting was great.
What were your thoughts on Fred, Robin?
I think it's difficult because I think a lot of my opinion maybe comes from later books. Because, for example, there's a novella that's based on his backstory, and that was probably like the first novella I ever bothered to pick up for a series. And they actually incorporated that into the show, where it's not in the first book. And I think that gives, I don't know, not just fleshes out his background a little bit more. But I think he's an interesting character. But I think I hadn't thought about it before actually, how much he probably is still working in his own interests. I hadn't really taken that into consideration. Actually, thinking on it now. So maybe.
And Chris, is it interesting that in the TV show he is played as quite a bit more aloof? His motivations aren't as clear as in the novelization.
Yeah, I think that could be influencing me, because when I'm reading Fred, I'm still thinking show, and I need to get out of that and just let him be who he's going to be in the book.
It's always so hard to separate things, isn't it? Once you
Right.
Yeah, it is tough to separate the two. And there was the other detective. And season one spoilers, but for the show, but I think in the show there was the whole other storyline with the Havenworth, is that his name? The other detective that's with Miller,
Uh,
the one that's not from the belt. He had a whole nother storyline in the show that I think it could have done without. Now that I've read the book, I think that was kind of pointless. I think he was attacked and he was
Is he killed in the TV series? Sorry.
no. It's okay. I think he's seriously injured. I think he comes back. Or I don't want to say too much, but I think he's seriously injured or stabbed or attacked during the riots when all this
Yeah.
first happens, and I don't know if it needed it. So I think it's better without it.
Because I think in the book, isn't there basically they took the storyline of that random person that they find in the riots, and I think they merged those together. So they put that does occur in the book, I think, but I think it's just a random person. And I think what they did was took that and then made it the detective. I guess maybe bring it home a little bit more. I'm not sure. But yeah, when I was reading through that, I was like, oh, I didn't remember this in the in the book or in the TV series. So it's a subtle difference, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting what they have to move around for the adaptation, the changes they have to make it fit for the different medium. So. But I did like the proto-molecule being basically a weapon that just got derailed on its way to Earth. I thought that was very interesting. I love that about the... I felt like I understood the proto-molecule more in the book than I did in the show.
yeah.
Is it a weapon?
Well, that's what they speculated, that it was sent. It was on its way to Earth, and then it got caught in Saturn's moon, or it got derailed by Jupiter or Saturn.
Yeah,
and getting stuck.
No, I didn't realize it. I completely missed the fact that it was a weapon. I thought it was just a terraforming type esque thing. Like, I'm not sure if it was meant to destroy, just to create, but I may have missed that completely.
Yeah, I think in the book it's speculated that it's a weapon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that may change through. Yeah, what did you think about that, Layla?
My thought was I wasn't quite sure either in the book, but the key point is that the humans are turning it into a weapon. They're turning it, whatever it is, it's becoming a coveted thing that, ultimately they're already in opposition over it. And so I think it's more about, like the Rorschach, now I can talk, test where, it's what does it say about us as humans that we would handle this way. It might be used for good. It might end up terraforming Venus, in a beautiful way with the Adam and Eve, down there now, Miller and Julie. So, but at the same time, it can do a lot of damage as well. And it's how we behave that is the issue. So.
Chris, I did think they did emphasize how dangerous and lawless the station and factions are, links nicely to the future politics in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And they did touch a little bit. I felt like they touched a little bit more on it being like a corporate entity, that it was for profit. They were trying to use the test of proto-molecule for profit and for for their own gains. So I thought that was, I don't remember that being too heavily on the show. I think it was more of the focus on the political side of the conflict between Mars and the Belt and Earth.
Yeah. So I think it's relatable, even to, and again, it might not come out on the show like this, but we're inventing new things all the time that can be used for various purposes, and it comes down to human behavior as to how we're going to handle that. And so when you have these characters, Holden, who is very, just very sure about how the world should work, and what is right and what is wrong. And then we have the belt through Naomi. I thought it was very interesting their conversation where he was upset that Miller had just killed the CEO, of whatever the company is. Um, but Naomi didn't see it the same way. And Miller didn't see it the same way because the belt's way of handling incompetence or whatever is just to off the person. So, like there's that story of how the guy wasn't running the moisture cylinder right or something, and I don't know if he was spaced or something, and everybody just went on with their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it's, again, it's like what is right or wrong in the context you're in. So it's really interesting to think about.
Definitely. I also liked that about that particular scene actually, about how it was more about Miller was worried about how the guy was spinning it to people, how he was selling it to the people, and he was like almost future thinking that actually if people start listening and understanding that, they're just going to let him redo it all over again. And he'd already jumped like four steps ahead, where everyone else was just kind of at step one. He was just not prepared to let that happen. And again, quite a sad point where later on you find out that he made that decision knowing full well that it was going to cost him being able to stay with the rest of the crew. And again, which is why I think Miller was such a sad character. Yeah. And I think remembering, I think that plays again later on in the series.
So, what did you think about his choice, Robin? Did he should he have shot the was it a scientist or the official?
Yeah, the CEO. Yeah.
Yeah,
I 100% think he did the right thing.
What about you, John? Would you have done that?
I don't know that I would call it the right thing. It was just the best of bad choices. Because I mean, he has a very good point. Imagine if they had put that guy on trial, and he would have gotten off the hook. And the way he was spinning it, there was a very good chance of that happening. Because he had the lawyers. He was a smooth speaker, so that the risk of him actually getting off the hook for it was probably too high.
Mm-hmm.
And Layla, what do you think about that one?
I'm more on Holden's side of this, that but at the same time, I do understand sometimes it's the contextualization, the context of the moment. A belter who sees a bigger threat and who knows who is going to automatically lose out of any situation that comes up. I can understand. I think what Holden did, Miller did. I think what he did makes sense for Miller and for the belt in the book. But I'm more on the Holden side of, do no harm. So that's what's fun about it.
I can understand the whole thing of, I guess, Holden's point as well was that it's not guaranteed that will occur. So you're already punishing something for something that could occur rather than something that he's definitely going to. So I guess that's the kind of the swing point there as well.
Yeah.
I guess you could learn a lot from him if you could control his reach, but like everyone's mentioned, he had the power and the influence and the skill to just go back to what he was doing before. So that's the thing, is can you learn from him to help prevent it from happening again, or do you just eliminate that possibility? So lots of interesting questions I didn't expect to have after this one. It was a fun book, but it also left questions in your mind, things to think over.
Something in comparison I did think about, though, Holden was so upset with Miller for doing that, but I kind of equate what Holden did by his mass announcements. I mean, those caused deaths too, you know. I mean, but it just wasn't from his direct hand. But Holden really was as reckless as Miller was, but in a different kind of way, you know. So
I wouldn't necessarily. I think the first one I can see again. I can talking earlier. I can see where he's coming from because it was kind of to save his skin almost. But I fully agree with you. Later on, like the second time or like the third, like at that point, he is exactly being reckless with what he's doing without thinking about it for sure.
Yeah. And what did everybody think about the romance between Holden and Naomi? What was it? Because I could have done without it. I don't know. I did like that it wasn't an automatic thing that he had to. It wasn't just a didn't happen and everything worked out. It was a little funny. I mean, the angle that they worked about, Holden had to pursue her, and she kind of like, kind of left him hanging there for a little bit, and kind of, just I like that it wasn't easy. It wasn't like too. It was a good, it was funny, but I could have done without the romance portion of it. I don't know. It just seemed like it didn't need it, I guess. But I'm not sure what everyone else thinks.
I could have done without it too.
maybe too soon for this book. I think the big romance was Miller and Julie, one-sided, or Miller's imagination.
Yeah.
Julie of his imagination. And I was kind of, something diminished it for me in that Holden is sort of presented as he's constantly falling in love with somebody. And so Naomi coming back and saying, well, now it's my turn, even though you never paid attention to me before this. I thought that was, I thought that was good. I mean, to bring up, but it also kind of just diminished its quality to me. And yeah.
Yeah, I think oddly, I do actually quite like romance in books, as long as it's not like the overarching. But I think you're right. I think the Miller and his head was the main romance in this. I think I think it pointed to his character quite a lot, because again, I did actually like the discussions about like his character, that he does fall in love with everybody. Although he does it in a really nice way somehow with all the people on the ship. You're right. I don't think it. I agree that I don't actually think it was completely necessary in this one because of all the other bits. But I guess extra plot points. I don't know. So.
Yeah, I think I can see later on it becoming something has more substance, but on this one, I'm not sure. I mean, I did it, like I said, the part when she was kind of telling him, like, you've dated someone this whole time and you're always with someone, and I like that she wasn't just sure, let's do this. It was more like she was, she made him put the brakes and look in the mirror a little bit. But yeah, at the end, I think it could have done without later on. I think that would have been better, but maybe it'll change.
Yeah, I think it's a good. I think ultimately the characterization and their personalities are drawn the correct way for a romance to develop. It just seemed very, again, formulaic, But then again, back to this, I just kind of feel each character, like in this first book, they're representing something, like Holden's representing right and wrong, and Miller's representing like the cynicism, and then we've got the big imaginary romance. I mean, there's like, and so there needed to be a human romance as well. So kind of like, again, those paperback novels where it's like all the characters are drawn like really simply and something happens. But I kind of feel like that's what this is, with tongue in cheek, with the humor.
So I have a question. I don't know this, maybe because you have a writing experience or whatever else, you read a lot of books. I've always wondered about again going back to the end of this bit off piece, about the writers and how they write as the two people together and how they manage to do it consistently in the ending. Because I can understand them doing it for a certain amount of time, but making sure that it's the same kind of feel each time, even though it's two writers. That kind of boggles my mind a little bit. I didn't know if you guys have any idea or know actually what their process would be or what you would imagine it would be.
That's a good question. Well, have you done that before, Layla? Have you collaborated like that?
I have on very short things, just creatively, or on poetry, really. But what I did notice in this, and why I keep kind of going back to the Star Trek novellas and that kind of thing. I mean, there is a formula. Many good pieces of literature are based on biblical stories, or based on mythological stories. And I think I have no idea because I've not read anything about these authors, but you can kind of sit back and say, okay, we want to tell the story of Adam and Eve in this book. What if we had the story of Adam and Eve where it's this cynical, washed up, detective out in the asteroids? I mean, um, I could, I just think that is the creative part of it. But if you look at how it's structured, I do think that they use some literary techniques, I guess, like that to put it together. But then it's still really fun and creative at the same time.
I'm pretty surprised that they managed to collaborate and make it so seamless, because I would have never known that it was two authors if I'd so I think they did a great job. But most of the authors that I've talked to that have collaborated, it's like a back and forth that they'll send work to each other and they'll kind of bounce off each other. So for them to do that for such a long series, for these tomes of these huge books, that's quite an accomplishment that they would be able to do that for so long and it'd be so successful.
I don't know if it had any influence, but one of them, I think, had worked or as an assistant for George R. Martin, so maybe they kind of had a sense of, again, what sells, what are the key story points to hit. But it works, and that's what makes it fun. So,
Yeah, it was a fun one. I think there are some heavier themes in it, but I think overall it was a fun ride. So I'm curious to see how the rest of the series goes. Is everyone continuing, or is it just me?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to give it one more book. So.
Okay, cool. So I know it's getting late for Robin. So we can. So John, what are your closing thoughts on this one?
It's again not a favorite book of mine, but like I said, I am willing to give the second book a shot. I bought the first book, and after I didn't buy the second one until I had completed it, and there's parts of it I like, there's parts of it I didn't really care for. So we'll see how the second one goes.
Well, if you weren't a big fan of the detective storylines, it may be over. So we may not have too much detective anymore. But we'll find out. Laylee, what are your thoughts on this one?
Overall, I really enjoyed it. I think looking forward, I hope we see Miller again in some way, and I'm looking forward to more characterization of Amos now. That I felt like he did have more depth in this book than I had expected him to have. And so just looking forward. I'm looking forward to reading the second book.
Cool. And Robin, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, obviously I really, really enjoyed it. I really want to I think when I read the next book, I'm going to read a lot more into the proto-molecule side of things and try and get to grips with that and understand it a little bit more, because clearly I think I either missed that or it wasn't in depth. So I think for the rest of the series, definitely going to read it. And yeah, looking forward to actually finding out a little bit more, reading into a little bit more of that side of things, and really kind of getting to understanding of it, because I don't think I got that from the first book, really.
Yeah. And just really quickly, Tammy commented, the character stereotypes have a lot to do with the story, starting out as a tabletop game. Holden the Paladin, Amos the Brute, and Naomi the Engineer, etc.
Oh, how interesting.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything about that?
That's a lot to think about there.
It does, yeah. And Chris, looking forward to everyone's thoughts on book 2. Evaslera is the greatest.
She is.
I agree.
So yeah, we will. We can do another meetup for the rest of this, for the second book, if you guys are up for it, and anyone else who wants to join. But I really like this one. I think it was almost like my initial was a 5-star, but there's something missing from it. I can't put my finger on it, but I did really enjoy it. I loved Miller. I loved the background and what we learned about him, and I loved there were some great scenes in it, and I love the proto-molecule and the whole storyline behind that.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a good time with it. It was fun. Good times. So thanks, Robin, for staying up late to hang out with us, and of course John and Layla. It's always a pleasure to chat with both of you. So I'll leave everyone's channels down below, and Layla, I'll leave your contact information below too. So
Okay.
thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.